the land where phrases like, I have a dream, meant something. I grew up where I believed that freedom existed, that that's what I was fighting for. I believed that the Statue of Liberty was a symbol of our liberty, that we all came from all over the world because we didn't want to live underneath the monarchy, that our founding fathers made America the land of the free and the land of the brave. I don't care what you say to me. I don't care if there's a shadow government or there's people out there that's trying to take it away from us. This is America, damn it, and I'm taking it back.
And now your host, Terry Joyce.
All right, welcome to the Freedom of Joyce show here on American Freedom Radio. I am Terry Joyce, and I will be hosting here for the next couple of hours. If you're tuned in live, thank you very much for doing so. Sometimes I think, not every time, but lately I just feel I wake up or I have a realization, I start the show, or before the show, I just had a thought, like, everything is so bizarre. Everything is so bizarre. You know, just not only, I think, sometimes for my own life personally, but actually what's going on in the world. And then there was these fairies around the princess with their, with their little wands. And of course, we know that wands are often made out of the holly tree. And I just thought, how curious this is. And I want to get back to my guest, who I am going to introduce here in a moment. As you know, there has been a big, convention, and I'm probably not saying it right, but, in Poland, where there's going to be many speakers. Miles Johnston has been involved in putting that together, and of course, the death of Max Spears also being integrated into all of this. And my guest was scheduled to speak about this topic. She's done quite a bit of research on it. I'm very excited to bring this to American Freedom Radio because for some reason she was not allowed to speak at this particular event on the topic, and it seems like maybe the topic is a little bit more controversial than we would have thought. And so I'd like to introduce to the show. Many of you may already know her. She has written several books and been on various shows, and I'm happy to introduce Cara St. Louis. Thank you for being here on the Freedom of Joyce show today.
Well, thanks. I've just managed to sign on about halfway through your Walt Disney spiel, so I'm not really sure what you started with.
I did start talking about fairies and the topic that we would be discussing today as well.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit because what you've just said isn't true.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about this conference that Miles had put together. It's called the International Basis Conference. This would be the second International Basis Conference. It happened in England in August, and I was the keynote speaker this year. However, he was also on the agenda. It's not that I wasn't allowed. It's that I pulled out. Okay, I pulled out because Christine Hart, who's somebody that you know,
yes,
was bringing Channel 4 and BBC into film, and I don't do lecturing in front of the mainstream media, so it wasn't that I wasn't allowed to speak, and it really enraged Miles, and he went to his website, tore down all of the work that we did together, and as far as I know, he claims there aren't any backups, which is fine, I guess. A little juvenile, and it's a little silly, and I'm really not sure at this point in activist land why anyone would why we stay away from the mainstream media. If we haven't learned that lesson, I just don't know what we've learned. So you can see that that's not really. I mean, that's a bit different than the scenario you were describing. It's something that happened several weeks ago. It was me. It was Max Spears. It was Peter Paget. It was I don't think Carrie Cassidy was coming because she has to go back to California for some reason, and just several people on the agenda. And I was going to roll out my FAE lecture, which is a seed race. As FAE for years now, not really understanding why necessarily, but waiting for that to come to me. And some of the research coming out of Germany just sort of shored up what I was getting ready to bring, and people were appearing out of nowhere to tell me what they knew about the FAE and about the ancient Irish history and how that fit in to my research. And so anyway, that's what happened with Miles. And I think it was a week, 10 days ago, something like that. There was a conference that included, I think, Carrie Cassidy, but I know for sure Simon Parks. I know for sure Peter Paget, Harold Kautzbella, Miles Johnston, and Max Spears. And for me, know people as I do, that was just a reptile convention. And I'm not sure what Max was doing there in the middle of all that, but it was a few days later, 3 or 4 days later, I suppose, he was due to give an interview on Christine Hart's show. It was not the first time he'd interviewed with her, but he had to cancel because he had a migraine for a couple of days right before the radio show, and then he took off for Poland and he collapsed, and that's what I know about that. So,
okay. Yeah, I all I know is that there was a mix. You were in the mix of being one of the people that were speaking there, and there's a video also with Miles Johnston where he speaks that there was some concern of Max actually doing your material. Is that?
Max did my material all the time. He did my material all the time. And it was a conversation that we were kind of trying to have on Facebook in messages. We really didn't know each other, but I would periodically see him lecturing on something that I had just brought out, and I don't really care about that necessarily, but if you watch Basis 45 Part 4, one of the things that I talk about is being absolutely fed up with people just kind of appropriating each other's research. It's not something I do. I try very hard to make sure that people understand what my prime sources, my original sources are, because I think that's important. And some of what I bring is my own, some belongs to other people. And I'm always extremely happy to get the original sources out into the daylight. I don't think that takes away from anybody. So that was, but you know what? That's small potatoes, really, compared to the other stuff that's going on. Yes, I kept seeing Max, the stuff that I was rolling out, and it irritated me. But so what? You know?
Right. Yeah. I can relate to what you're saying, especially when you do presentations. Now, I did read. I was sent a document over on something that you've written, and I was able to read it before the show, which I'm glad I got a bit of background. Yes, and now you, from what my understanding, from what I read, you are part of the bloodline from the Fae. Is that correct?
Identify as Fae. I don't think that we can trace it necessarily via. I think we're talking about. This is one of the things that when we're talking about the Fae, or we're talking about interdimensional beings, and we're talking about energetic bloodlines. Okay, I don't think you could take blood out of my body and go, oh, that's Fae. I think that we're talking about an energetic line here, and that is because we're kind of starting in the middle. Let me start at the beginning. All right. Okay. I think maybe it would be useful for me to say that I've been doing this work for quite some time. I have 5 books out. The first one is called Consolatus Companion, and that has to do with the archontic presence in our life, and that's been out for a long, long time. I didn't even know I was writing about the archons at the time. All right, and in 2010, July of 2010, there was an incident in my life that really brought me into the activist sphere, okay? And that was that on July 11th, 2010, my mother, who had a very high security clearance with the U.S. Navy and worked with Operation Paperclip scientists in England and worked for the certain naval weapons in the United States and worked as a a technical editor for subcontractors trying to get work from the Defense Department and DARPA in Hawaii. This was my mother, and she was run over and killed on her way to church. She was, 74 years old. She was long retired, but she saw a lot of things that she could not tell me about, but that scared the hell out of her. Okay. And she was just about to the other side of the street when a van came out of nowhere and mowed her down, and she died in my arms just a few hours later. Now, the fact that I had a strong sense that this was not a random event and I wanted to find out what exactly had happened led me to do research that ended up informing me, because it's very easy to become informed about lots of things if you just turn the key in the lock a little bit. And when I remembered that she worked with the Operations Paperclip scientists, and then in the wake of, first of all, death of John Wheeler in Washington, D.C., the top security advisor for 3 presidents, who was found in a dumpster, that brought me into thinking about my mother's death again. And then the very next day, animals, 10,000 blackbirds fell from the sky and fish started to wash up on the sea. And this led me to look up electromagnetic weapons, okay? And when you look up electromagnetic weapons, you come up with chemtrails immediately. And all of these things that are open secrets, they're right there for everybody to discover, okay? So that's what got me into the activist realm to begin with. Now, in the United States, it's very difficult to get information out. We are under information lockdown in the United States, and so in most English-speaking countries. I ended up in England. I ended up in London. And the thing about London is the city of London being the economic, part of the spider's web, there's a lot of information that flows very freely from London out to the rest of the world. And so I was able to start communicating with the rest of the world about what I was learning. And that was the start of my activist career. Now, my book, The Sun Thief, was a fictionalized account of that investigation of my mother's death, and about a chemtrail pilot who stole a plane. And it's become an extremely popular way for people to introduce other people who are having a hard time with this idea of chemtrails to the idea of chemtrails, because it's really a thriller, and it engages the reader, and it gives them all kinds of 100% accurate technical data. Okay, now that was translated into German. And the person who translated that into German was a fellow called Harald Kautzwelle. I'm not sure if you've heard of Harald at this point. I brought him into the United States. He's a very controversial figure. He's got a very interesting esoteric take on the aerosol war. And he and I wrote a book together called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. And that's been out on the market for about a year. And it is about the social engineering of the 20th century leading to the downfall of Western civilization. And that is what I wrote about. And then the second half of the book is Harold talking about the chemtrails. Okay? Now, these are the things that were in front of me and to do, to promote and to get out for many years. One of the things the thing I'm working on right now is a follow-up to that. It's called a workbook, and the workbook is divided into several episodes. Now, when I use the word episode, I mean a chapter, and episode is a literary term. It's not a television term. It was stolen by television. And so episode 1 is about the fact that most of the history we live in, the timeline, is absolutely false. And there have been an extra 1,000 years inserted in the timeline to justify various reigns of illegitimate monarchies and just all of this kind of thing. And then the question is why? The question is, why would they go to the trouble to do all of that? Well, it turns out in my research that most of this is to cover up the fact that we are only about 200 years away from our Atlantean ancestors, if that. And that is what brought me to the subject of the Fae. Now, there is a personal reason for me to be involved in this idea of the Fae, okay? When I was writing The Sun Thief, the book about my mother's death, as you can imagine, there were all kinds of sort of distractions, like my steering went out, like someone tried to run me into oncoming traffic, like I couldn't get a police report about my mother's death, and all that stuff, okay? And the day that I finished writing that book, which was March 31st into April 1st of 2012, my house burned to the ground. Now, I ran back in and I got the thumb drive out of the computer that had that book on it. And later on, I realized, and when I was thinking about this, because I used to work with a couple of very deeply initiated people in the United States, I lived on Temple Street, okay? And the reality is that when the temple burns, the door to Ephesus opens. And I did not know what that meant, okay? But if you take the word Ephesus, which is a mystery school, apart, it means I am of the Fae, P-H-E, okay? Now, there's a fellow in Germany. I just kind of held that for myself. And there's a fellow in Germany called Erhard Landmann. Erhard Landmann has been doing research on the Fae for about 30 or 40 years, and he's been doing it in obscurity. However, my husband is German and came across this information and translated it for me, and it turns out that there's a planet. There's a planet in the Big Dipper called Fichte, okay? And this is where the Fae originated. So when you talk about Walt Disney and his fairies, you couldn't be farther from the reality of the Fae. The Fae are a seed race. The Fae are one of the seed races. They are one of the shepherds, if not the shepherds of this planet, and they are the absolute enemy of the Draco. Okay? So that kind of brings you sort of up to speed on my story a little bit, and we can talk about the Fae from there, probably in a deeper way. So do you have questions about the Fae based on that?
Well, I thank you for giving the background on how it came about, and no, I mean please do continue from let's do a presentation on it here for the American Freedom Radio audience.
Well, I could, but I'm getting ready to roll out this lecture in Australia next week.
Oh, great!
What I can tell you is this. If etymologically speaking, if you look at all of the words in the English language that either have or begin with P-H-E or F-E-Y or F-E or F-A-E, you see that most of our language has hints of the Fae in it. The Fae it's a feminine energy. It's a feminine line of alien, and it's also a feminine line of seed race, a feminine line. It's intradimensional and interdimensional, meaning it's kind of difficult to wrap your head around it because they come from outside and they're also within. They're within because they are married to the earth and probably made the decision to do that eons and eons and eons ago in a way that we don't really understand. So they are also part of the earth, shepherds of the earth. They care for the apple tree, and in that way the apple, meaning us, is also cared for. Okay, so also one of the ways there's really two ways that the Fae have presented themselves that are important to us, generally speaking. First of all, these in most cultures, you will find some sort of story or tale of a woman in white or a female who appears. It's certainly the case in Spain. It's the case all over Europe. Or additionally, you will find appearances of Mary. These are the Fae appearing. Okay, these are stories of the Fae. The Fae. Here's a good example of something that we misinterpret that we see. If you see one of those, I'm sure most of your audience has seen pictures of Mary draped in her blue cloak, standing on top of a planet with a snake under her feet and 12 stars around her head. Is this something that you're familiar with?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that with that image offhand.
Well, you should have a look at that. It's very, very common when we're talking in terms of Mary. And if you think of that, that is the snake under her feet is the Fae conquering the Draco. This is important to know. This is important to know because these are sort of planetary and earthly adversaries. Okay, there's that. And also the etymological history, and also stories that come out of Ireland have to do with the Fae. But when they say away with the fairies, as they do in Ireland, they mean something. It gives a completely different meaning to that. Do you know? Because this is a seed race. We are all in some way descendants of the Fae. The other thing you need to know is that they come from a planet called Thecta, which is the lower left-hand corner of the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is a circumpolar constellation. And when it appears to revolve around Polaris, and I say appears because obviously it does not revolve around Polaris, but when it does, it forms a swastika every year. It goes through the 4 seasons, and it forms a swastika. Because the swastika is one of the most ancient symbols on this planet, and you find it everywhere for eons and eons and eons. For me, this is really good evidence that they've left their calling card for us from their arrival.
I noticed you mentioning that in the paper that you wrote too, as well, about the swastika. Why do you think? I mean, just this is a little bit not necessarily on the topic, but why do you think that the Nazis have adopted that symbol and then changed it? What is that? Why are they doing?
Everything has been inverted in the 20th century, has it not?
Yes.
All good has been converted to evil. I mean, that's just what's happened. Everything is inverted. When you hear things come out of politicians' mouths, you can expect the opposite. Satanism is all about inversion, okay? And so, of course, they would take something like that and invert it. You know, the powers that be and the powers behind the powers that be have spent an awful lot of time and energy trying to keep us in an amnesiac state and away from our true history. So these sorts of things are inverted so that they don't, trigger any memories for us.
What is the Fae's connection to Lemuria and Atlantis?
Well, this is something that I'm investigating strongly. The most ancient story that has been brought to me is called the Battle of Moytura. It was a battle, so to speak. I mean, I'm not really sure what that means now. It took place around the area of Sligo in Ireland, and this is a bardic tale that you can see if you want to. There's a fellow called Robin Williamson who told that bardic tale for the camera. It takes about an hour. If you look that up on YouTube, you can find it. It's Megalithomania 2009, I think, is when he told that. But he talks about the Fomorans who came either over the sea or from under the sea to Ireland and met the Tuatha De Danann eventually on the island of Ireland. Now, the Lemurians, the period of Lemuria, which was during the Saturn incarnation of Earth, was not a solid incarnation. We were watery, we were misty, we were not bone and hardness at that point, okay? And so to say the Lemurians came from under the water or over the water, or the Fomorans, makes me feel like they're just talking about the Lemurians. However, that bardic tale talks about the Fomorans appearing at the edge of Ireland with one eye to covet, one arm to grasp, and one leg to trample. So to me, I'm not sure who we're talking about there, because that sounds like a negative landing. That sounds like the adversary landing. That sounds like, for lack of a better way to describe it, I often talk about the bad fairies and the good fairies. Now, the Tuatha De Danann came, I believe, at least at this point in time, from the mouth of the Danube River, and they came to Ireland. And these were probably the precursors of the Atlanteans. In fact, almost surely they were. So what we could be talking about is a contest, the bad fairies and the good fairies there. We could also be talking about the evolution from the Lemurians to the Atlanteans, metaphorically speaking. I mean, this particular battle and the tale that's told about it requires and deserves and really calls out for deep meditation and study, which is one of the things that I'm getting ready to do. I'll be going to Ireland at some point this autumn with my friend Maria Wheatley, whom you may or may not have heard of. She's a master dowser and one of the guardians of Avebury, and the daughter of Dennis Wheatley, whom I guess was a fairly famous novelist, although I'm not familiar with his work. And we are doing some very deep investigation on this together.
Now, I'm noticing in what you wrote that you mentioned that the archonic infection originated in what we know as Israel and Palestine. Could you belabor a little bit more on that?
Well, I think that that's certainly the first place that we notice it. And the reason I talk about that is because one of the Crusades, if you want to call it that, was the Knights Templar sending the Teutonic Knights into the area of modern-day Germany to conquer the beautiful, diverse, lovely tribes that existed there and set up this artificial construct called Prussia. So how that trickled down in the end was a Prussian monarchy that was clearly psychopathic, and psychopathy tends to be one of the symptoms of the archontic infection. So it seems to me that one could probably trace at least the first evidence I've come across, certainly, of the archontic infection to where the Teutonic Knights were sent from, which was Jerusalem.
When you talk about good fairies and bad fairies, how bad are the bad fairies, and what are some of the things that they do that you would say would be negative to the planet and the human race?
Well, when I talk about the bad fairies, what I'm really talking about in my context, which is probably not the most exhaustive context yet that there is, I'm talking about them chasing the good fairies. My research for the first 2 episodes of the workbook came from about 2,000 pages worth of writing by a fellow called Anatoly Fomenko, and about 40 on the false history, the false chronology, and about 42 videos that I watched that came from a woman called Ivanova, and she has a series called the New Earth series. It's Newearth, where she actually does some pretty spectacular work tracing the flight of the Atlanteans and making the case for the fact that they're only about 200 years behind us. And so when I look at these sorts of things and I delve into my research and I realize what's going on, it seems to me that we are not in the midst of several small skirmishes that change from century to century, but rather we are witnessing and recognizing one long overarching battle, one long battle that's been going on probably since the Fomorans landed on the coast of Ireland. And for me, this is a chase. This is a chase based on, and the evidence supports this, of the bad fairies, I guess, chasing the good fairies, which turned out to be the Atlanteans all over this planet. And there's evidence of the Atlanteans in architecture, in religion, in culture, all over the planet. And one of the things that's been happening for at least the last 100 years and probably longer is that many of the skirmishes that happen, many of the attacks that happen, the invasions, especially in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, are meant to wipe out evidence of this because, as you know, I'm sure, a lot of the collateral damage in these sorts of things ends up being museums and pyramidal structures and artifacts from ancient days. I guess you would say ancient days. But one of the things that comes up over and over and over again for us is that we come across these cities or these temples or these constructs out in the world, and we have absolutely no idea who could have built them or how they were built or any of that. And I think that the reality is a few hundred years ago, there were Atlanteans still alive on this planet. There may very well still be in hiding, being chased by what we would call the bad fairies. Now, I do know that the Fae and the Draco are absolute adversaries. So can we substitute those names for good and bad fairy? I don't know. I really don't know. Could you say that the bad fairies are, infected with this archontic infection and maybe that's what happened? I don't know. This is open to speculation, and this is part of my research.
Well, the whole concept of good and bad is something that I think we grow up with. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in our films. It's in our religions. It's and as humans, there's this thought that we have a choice or a responsibility to choose whether we want to do the good or the bad, the angel and the devil on your shoulder, all this, the duality that exists. A lot of times now, going farther, then there's we talk about the Dracos being supposedly bad, or certain races or entities being bad in and of itself.
Right.
But is it? I don't know how real that is. I mean,
well, that's relativism, and relativism is not. I mean, first of all, duality is satanic. Polarity is what we're really looking at, okay? Duality is what artificial intelligence is trying to keep us in. This is the binary code, and we are not binary. Human beings are not binary. The duality is not natural to us. The duality belongs to artificial intelligence. We are polar. Male and female are polar. Good and evil are polar. Those sorts of things. And essentially, I think that underneath the inorganic hologram that we exist in, when you look at the organic hologram that we actually construct as human beings, as mighty human beings, you're looking at something that's really just built on natural law. And natural law is pretty easy. There's really only one sin, and that's thou shalt not steal. That's it. That's all there is to it. However, that really travels out. There's all kinds of ramifications that go with that. I don't think that relativism is. We have grown up with relativism. We have. We also have free will. We can make these choices between one thing and another. But I think that duality is something that's sort of been pulled down over our eyes, and when we think of it, we insert dualism when we mean polarity, because dualism is binary. Dualism is artificial intelligence.
Well, you're the first person that I've heard it equating it to artificial intelligence before. So, thank you. That's sure.
That was quite the lesson for me to learn too. I mean, I did lectures where I talked about dualism, and I didn't know what I was talking about. Not yet. But that has to do with the numbers. It has to do with the numbers. We are the music of the spheres, Terry. We are all the numbers, up to 12, and 12 being the most natural, normal number for us, not 10. We've been shoved down into 10, and 10 is not normal for us. We are not 1 and 2. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are all the way up, And one of the things that's happening is that artificial intelligence is trying to cut us off at 2 and make it a duality, a true duality. But that's not us. It's not organic. That's the inorganic hologram, which is made by AI. That's the copy.
Now, number 9 is I read a bit. You mentioned the number 9 a lot and how it's associated with the Fae. Yeah. Can you elaborate more on the number 9 and what that symbolizes?
Well, number 9 is the humanitarian number. Okay, that is the number of sort of all empathy. 9 is my number. Which I know, again, we leave ourselves, when we incarnate on this plane this time, we leave ourselves sort of covered with sticky notes. You know what I mean? And then as we go through our incarnation, if we make the right choices, then you come up against, you can remove one note after another note, after another note, after another note, until you step into your true sort of calling. But 9 is one of the most important numbers. It really is. And the ancient Chinese knew that. They often built their cities on the concept of 9. I was born on 9/9. I mean, 9 is very, very important, and it is the humanitarian number. It is also the number of starting afresh. It is the number of renewal. It is the number for regeneration. I mean, it's our number now. Human beings in this time frame, this point in time. We are 9 at this point.
Well, it makes me think of the Beatles song 9, or John Lennon 9, and I think John Lennon had a reoccurring. He had 9s in his life too, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9. And it's also the thing that you have to. Well, you don't have to do anything, but the thing that I'd like most people to remember, since I write extensively on the imagination, is that what all of this is about, whether it's chemtrails, whether it's war, whether it's the Fae, the false history, all that stuff that in the last couple of centuries has been meant to befuddle us. This is all about gaining access to the human imagination. This is the prime reason that I do any writing anymore. We are unique in the universe. We are. And what we can do is absolutely unique in the universe, and that makes us very desirable, which is one of the reasons the Draco are here. It's one of the reasons that all kinds of things are going on. Now, the imagination, the human imagination, is the translator between the morphogenic field and the material plane. Plain and simple, that's what we can do. AI is here to try to get a hold of that. That is the goal, is to try to get a hold of that. Unfortunately, the predator, the parasitic predator, doesn't even have it has no way to actually perceive our organ of imagination, okay? It can't find the organ of imagination. So everything that's happening to us is the process of elimination, looking for the imagination. Now, transhumanism and everything that follows has to do with gaining control of the human organism in order to try to use our imagination for their own purposes, okay? So that's something that I think is really, really important for people to understand is, we talk about all of these things. We talk about the attack on humanity and all of that. And it makes us feel small. It makes us feel little. And we are not small and little. We are under, if you think about it, why in God's green earth is there this broad spectrum, constant, unrelenting attack on us? Well, it's to gain something that we have that nothing else in the universe has, and that is our imagination. And that is why I have Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. It's why I have the workbook, and it's why there will be a third book, and it's the whole thing is called the Imagination Chronicles. So one of the things I lecture on far and wide is the imagination.
I overheard a conversation of moms one time, and one of the things that they said, they were trying to eliminate the word imagination from being taught in their schools to their children. They couldn't say it because it had the word magic in it too.
Yes, well, it is. That's what it is. It's I-mage-in, magic. That's exactly what it is. That's our magic. So they kind of knew that. But there's been a massive push to relegate the imagination to something that we should ignore. Well, of course that's what they're pushing, because that's our power.
Yeah, well, it's the creation of everything, basically. It's usually imagined first before it becomes reality.
Yep, anything you can imagine, it becomes reality, and we all know that.
Yeah. There's a sentence that you wrote, a paragraph. It's part of a paragraph. I'd like to read it for a moment. It really affected me deeply, actually. Okay. And it's the part where you write, controlling the weather as it seems to be the frenzied demonic goal of the geoengineers and soldiers may mean an attempt to control the word. The word, after all, is how we manifest via the sacred imagination from the morphogenic field to the material plane, our own enlivened hologram. Manifesting happens via sound. The oral histories are the authentic histories, so forth. The 20th century obsession with changing the frequency we bathe in should be considered a critical clue, as well as to where our power resides and what the predator is after. The word resonates via the human voice, and the vocal cords thrum to a vibration and frequency. Yep. That's very powerful.
Thank you. It's all about frequency, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. Most people don't realize because it came and went really fast. But I believe the reason that Prince was killed was because he was getting ready to record music back in 432 megahertz.
Oh.
See, that popped up and then it disappeared. Most people don't realize that. But he was getting ready to move back toward the earthly frequency, and that couldn't be allowed. Because if they keep us off, just even slightly off that frequency, then we're no longer in good and true communication with the Sophia, the cosmic being that we live on, nor are we healthy as we could be, because our frequency is disrupted. So, there you go.
Yeah, well, another thing too, it makes me think of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech aspect, and the battle over that here. It seems to be in the United States. Many entertainers who have fought to keep their words. I don't know. I made me think of Lenny Bruce, and different burning of books. If you think about the McCarthyism that happened, how the stopping of knowledge
Right.
and information to people. I mean, even think about this particular media and what we're doing here in relation to the false media that's being controlled.
Right, right. Well, the oral histories are the only ones that you can really trust, okay? However, I will say that the episode 1 has to do with the false chronology, and I will tell you that every original document that supposedly existed that helped these, there were two Jesuits in the 16th century with the help of some Benedictine monks who rewrote history for us. Wasn't that nice of them? And inserted an extra 1,000 years in our history to justify the reign of every monarchy that's in place right now. In other words, they're false monarchies. They don't deserve to be there. But one of the ways that actually was able to happen was that all of the original documents were destroyed by fire. You cannot go and look at an original document. You just have to assume and hope and trust that these two Jesuits who rewrote history were actually telling us the truth, because the only things that exist are the copies. So this is what you're talking about. You're talking about documents and information being destroyed so that a history can be put in place that supports the agenda of whoever's controlling this planet right now. Okay? And one of the things that's getting ready to happen, for example, I always say that the best histories are the oral histories, and one of the most important histories are the Vedic texts. Okay? And that's India, and you will find hundreds of thousands of people who get together and chant the Vedic texts out loud. I mean, it's just part of what they do. It's part of their meditation and sort of engagement with those texts. Well, there's some talk that the United Nations is getting ready to move to India. The United Nations moving to India, I believe, would be an attempt to sabotage that particular oral history, which they have not been able to subdue up to now. It's one of the few remaining oral histories. You can't burn that, can you?
No, you can't. And there's, as I understand too, there are certain words that you can say, being the way they're formed and the energy behind it and the sound that it makes. It does manifest reality for you. The words themselves are considered magical.
Yeah, that's probably true. Although I have to say that I don't think there's a word that comes out of a human mouth that doesn't have an effect. Okay. That's how mighty we are. Now, if you want to capture a people, you capture their language and you screw with it, okay? And if you've seen any of the people who are doing work on that, they're doing magnificent work on double meanings in the English language. The English language is extremely malleable, and that's one of the reasons that most governments are pushing for English to be learned worldwide, because through English, you can control populations. If I say good morning to you, or if I say, did you have a nice weekend, or thank God it's the weekend, or I'm at the weekend, you're also talking about mourning, as in death, as in grief. Good morning to you. You're also at the weekend. You're talking about being weak. Okay, we talk to ourselves all the time along those lines, and that's been inserted. And we don't pay attention to what it is that we're actually saying to ourselves and to others. And so we've been manipulated into using words to affect ourselves in ways that we don't understand, to keep us down, to weaken us, to make us feel unenlivened. And the reason that that's possible is because nothing that comes out of a human mouth lacks power or magic. I mean, we really have to get that. We really have to get that that's who we are. And that's why they want us controlled.
That makes sense. What comes to mind is the actress or the comedian Tina Fey. her last name being Fay.
Right.
Do you think that is intentional, or do you feel that she has some sort of link to the Fay?
I don't know. I think that the words FEAY or FEY, FAE, FE, and PHE are everywhere. Okay, they are everywhere. PHE, you'll see that in phenomenon. You'll see, which if you think about that, phenomenon, phenomen, name the Fae, name of the Fae. That's what that means. Phenomenon. FE means iron on the what am I trying to say? The chemical, the list of chemicals. FE means iron. There is a deep tale that the Fae are affected by iron. Are they in Ireland? You'll hear that. You keep iron with you to keep the Fae away. FE means iron. FAE is the feminine aspect of it. It's my favorite. It's the most beautiful aspect of it. And FEY is a negative aspect, is it not? FEY, to be Fae, is to be false. It's to be, it has an unscrupulous kind of connotation to it. These are the things you have to think about, or the things that are interesting to think about when it comes to our language. So if Tina Fey, if FEY is her choice, then she's making a bad choice there.
Why do you think Disney has promoted and adopted and it's almost like they branded the concept of the fairy and the fairy tale? I know that this has been part of us culturally, historically, not just from Disney. Yeah. But why do you think that is?
Well, same reason the swastika was inverted. Disney is notoriously satanic, and to take our concept of the fairy and turn it into something like that reduces it immeasurably, doesn't it?
Yes.
So we would think of it as incidental. It would just never come to our mind, number one. And number two, it's just a cartoon, for God's sake. Why would we care about that? It has no power in that construct at all.
But and also, I think it makes it so that it looks like fantasy. It is just pretend. It is just something that you look at as a child.
Right.
It's a toy that you buy at the grocery store.
Exactly. It just completely reduces it, and that was one of Disney's purposes. Disney's purpose was to do a lot of manipulation along those lines.
And what is the origination of the name of the fairy tale? How does that come about and play out?
Well, interestingly enough, this is one of the ways that comes to me is through the other thing that I do. Are you familiar with Waldorf schools? There's a kind of pedagogy that everything comes orally. There are no textbooks. Everything comes through the arts, and it is a pedagogy that supports the imagination completely and keeps the left and right hemisphere speaking to each other. This severing of the left and right hemisphere is unnatural. It was never meant to be that way. It's inorganic, and it's been done by the types of schooling that have been forced on us and the Industrial Revolution and the fallout from that. Anyway, one of the person who invented Waldorf education was a fellow called Rudolf Steiner, and he's a philosopher a magnificent philosopher of the 20th century, the 19th and 20th century. And in 1919, he started this pedagogical gesture called Waldorf schooling. And each year goes through the epochs, because what we believe is that the child comes in and incarnates by recapitulating the historical epics. And so when we teach history, we teach it that way. And one of the things that we do is a class 1 of first grade will start with the fairy tales, and we teach them how to read and write via the fairy tales. And I never could quite figure out why we would start with the fairy tales if we were starting with legitimate, actual historical epics. Well, guess what? That is a legitimate historical epic. I just didn't know it at the time. That's what fairy tales are. It's the first epic on this planet.
Wow.
Right.
So the fairy tale has a legitimate meaning, and it has a legitimate place in history, man. It's the first historic epic.
certainly of our memory, of our construction of ourselves as we incarnate on this planet. So I didn't realize that until I started this study of the Fae, because I couldn't quite figure out why we would start with fairy tales. But we start with fairy tales because Rudolf Steiner was a freaking genius. And he knew that was the first epic that we lived through, was the epic of the Fae.
Honestly, I have a fondness for fairies. Actually, there's something. Maybe it is the films and the mythology. Tinkerbell is so cute, and the way it's depicted. Just the thought of there being beings that can fly around. And then there's also the story of Avalon. And the mythology of that. Can you go into Avalon for us? We're going to take a break here in just a couple minutes, so we may have to continue, but if we can just kind of start it a little bit.
Actually, what I want to do is talk about this idea of the Fae being benign, because that's basically what you're describing, and that's Walt Disney. And it's not anybody's fault. That's how it's been presented to us. And so we do have this fondness. And we also have an ancient cellular memory, obviously, of the Fae that makes us, sort of warm to this idea and be very, very empathetic. And the reality is they're not a benign race at all. They are not a benign race. They protect Sophia from outside attackers, from those who would destroy and steal her. This is mighty business. They're warriors. So I don't know. I think one of the things that I would really like to do is bring that part of who they actually are to the fore, and that they are both from a planet. They are both from outside and from inside. They are being raised right now to a renewed consciousness that they have not experienced for a very long time. And that is to protect Sophia. They're warriors.
Well, that is, that's good to know. And I'm glad that you're getting that out to us, too, as well.
So when you're talking about Avalon, are you talking about the Lady of the Lake and all that? Because that was a Fae, by the way.
Oh, I mean, there's always they came from Avalon. There's the Avalon connection that fairies are connected to. Is that
they
not
didn't come from Avalon. They didn't come from Avalon. No. They came from the planet Fecta.
Oh, that's right. But then, so how is Avalon linked to them?
Well, tell me what you're asking me. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well, I mean, there's this. I mean, there's a connection of it seems, I don't know, in mythology or stories there seems to be like a connection with fairies to Avalon.
Okay, you're still not telling me what you're asking me, really. Are you talking about the Lady of the Lake? Are you talking about Arthur? Are you talking about Morgan Le Fay? Okay, yeah. Morgan Le Fay was the half-sister of King Arthur, okay? Her last name is Fay, F-E-Y. That was not necessarily a positive thing. I would say that all of that is, you can find that on the timeline somewhere of the history of the Fae on this planet. But it's on the timeline somewhere. It's not the origin of the Fae. Some people would say that Morgan, and I think this is wrong. I've heard one person has said that Morgan Le Fay was the first fairy-human hybrid, but that's not right.
All right, you know what? You can take a break right now. You're listening to the Freedom of Joyce show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
No rules, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, We are American Freedom Radio.
You see, I grew up in America. I grew up in the land where phrases like, I have a dream, meant something. I grew up where I believed that freedom existed, that's what I America, damn it, and I'm taking it back.
And now your host, Terry Joyce.
All right, welcome back to the Freedom
like
of Joyce show. Here
I like that little thing I just listened to.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
This is America, and I'm taking it back. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you actually, Carrie, that's a whole song I did.
Yeah?
That's an edited version. Yeah, there's a story behind that. We call it one take because a friend of mine had a .com records, and they did rapping up in Washington, and I said, can you do my theme song? And I didn't know that I was actually going to do my own speech over it, and we did it. I just did it in one take,
Yeah, okay.
and then he did his in one take, and it was just something that just happened.
Fun.
So,
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank
Good
you.
stuff. Yep.
Thanks. Appreciate it. So I'm with Cara St. Louis, and we have been talking about her most recent research on the Fae. But I want to bring up the topic of Max Spears because his death has taken us all by surprise, and I'd like to get your take and your thoughts on the information of what you think might have went down.
Well, I can tell you what I know. That's not speculative. I can just tell you what the facts are as I know them. I didn't know Maxwell at all. We'd had a couple of Facebook messaging conversations, largely about him using my work, but that was not a big deal. But we certainly travel in the same circles, and we were often at the same place, just at different times. There was did I say, I'm not sure if I said this on air, maybe I said this prior to us going on. No, I had to have already said this to you. There was a weekend before he died where he was together with Simon Parks, and I said that already, didn't I?
No.
And Harold. All right, well, the weekend before he died, he was at some sort of conference, a small weekend conference with Miles Johnston, Simon Parks, Harold Kautzvella, Peter Paget, who has turned out to be a complete fraud. His name is really Peter Fisher. He's not an MI5 agent at all. And possibly Cassidy. I'm not sure if she was in town yet. But he was hanging out with that crowd, which is basically just the lizard crowd, folks. It really is. Those are the Dracos. And then the next week, it was a couple of days before he went to Poland. He was supposed to have a radio interview with Christine Hart, and he had done several with her. It wasn't new. And he had to beg off because he had a migraine for those 2 days. And then he went to Poland, and then he collapsed in Poland. And that's really all I know. I know that since that has happened, a couple of things really are on everybody's radar. First of all, there are people who are really cranking out the drama on this, really taking advantage of it and making shows on his murder and all this stuff. And I don't know how appropriate that really is because we don't know what happened. Anyways, there's that going on. And the other thing, and I haven't listened to any of that because I don't want to hear it. Okay. The other thing that's going on, though, is that those of us who are doing this, I, for one, for sure, have really started to look at what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And it feels very much as if it's time to get even more serious than we were before. There's a big esoteric component to my knowledge base that I don't necessarily bring all the time because people may or may not be interested in that. It sort of depends on your audience, but I don't really care anymore. That's what I'm going to bring. I'm bringing the esoteric nature
I think it's there too.
Yeah, the esoteric nature of chemtrails, the esoteric nature of everything. It's all a big, black cloth that's been thrown over us to keep us from understanding who we are. So, it's affected everybody. Some people, people are sad. People are sad, people are horrified, people are, reevaluating, people are looking at it and seeing how it's kind of divide and conquer writ large, that sort of thing. So I'm sad for anybody who loved Max, and I'm sad for Max because that was a very short life. Like I said, I didn't really know him, but I know when I'm lecturing in Australia next week. And at both venues, there are going to be some kind of brief memorial to Max. So,
well, personally, I felt kind of panicked when it happened. Just hearing it, it was like, oh my God, one of us has been taken out.
Yep, man down. That's what it was, man down.
Yeah. I was like, oh no. And there were, I had interviewed him one time, and it happened to be ironically on Halloween, this last Halloween.
Yeah.
And we had done a show on, I'm very interested, Cara, my background is that I'm a comedian, and I worked in Hollywood. I was on a reality show, and had my own point of awakening, and then crossed over into coming eventually into this particular media. And so I was responded to a lot of the knowledge that he had about Hollywood and the esoteric aspect to all of that. Which, you know, looking at it, I began to realize, like, oh my God, this has been right in front of my eyes, and I've been walking around it, and I have not even really noticed it.
Right.
And so we had done a show on the background of Laurel Canyon and the military industrial complex, a bit of that, and a bit of like what's happening currently and other things about him and stuff. And so, and I had watched several of his shows. I'd gone back and first time I think I saw him was with Carrie Cassidy and James Casbolt. That first, that's the first time I saw him, and I just kind of followed some of these guys. And that particular knowledge. What I find interesting about all of it is right before he passed, I am Facebook friends with him, and so I had done several. I would interact with him either on his post or his comments or make a comment on it. And one of the things that he had put out was something on Michael Aquino. And about his praising of the director Oliver Stone and Sean Stone in this book, and him speculating all that kind of aspect, and that perked me up to some curiosity. And I of course I know of Michael Aquino a little bit, but I would say I was not an expert, and I'm still not an expert. But I went back and I looked at an interview of Michael Aquino on Buzzsaw. I think it's Buzzsaw. With Sean Stone, and watched that, and I listened to a Douglas Dietrich interview on Jeff Rentz, and I followed that a little bit, and then I pieced together some stuff that Max has said. And I find it really interesting that in his last interview, which by the way, I had not watched until last night after I did my show yesterday, because I brought this up on yesterday's show as well, that he is actually talking about this in his sort of he's coming in and out of consciousness while he's doing this interview, pretty much. And he mentions Buzzsaw a lot, and he mentions Aquino and all of this aspect.
Interesting.
One of the I just thought, man, and he made that. I think that was one of the last posts that he did make on Facebook. So I'm wondering about that link, and there's also. With Miles Johnston had done a video. I mean, I've only been watching a couple of videos because I'm trying to, I can't help but be curious. I'm trying to piece it together for myself as I think a lot of people are. And one of the things that Miles Johnston said was that they did some sort of spiritual ceremony or ritual after his death within the first 6 hours, because apparently the soul stays in the body up to 6 hours. And he says that we were trying to revive Max, but I'm beginning to think that it was something else.
Yeah, and what the hell is he talking about, really? I mean, how does he know? I mean, where's he getting that information, number one?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't give much credence to what Miles is saying anymore, because I think Miles has gone out to lunch for various reasons that I won't get into here. But I will also say that he did Max did a lot of interviewing with Christine Hart recently, and Hart is connected to Aquino. So she will talk about him visiting her in the astral or in her dreams at night. And, so there's a lot of connection there. This is the kind of thing that one needs to stay away from. One doesn't need to know a lot about Aquino. I don't even like saying his name, but I don't know I really don't know what could have possibly happened in Poland for that 6 hours, or who would have done what to Max, over in that period of time. The reality is, the soul stands by the body for a while, but the etheric body takes 3 days to leave. This is why it's a ceremony in several religions that people sit by the body for 3 full days while the etheric leaves the body.
Well, it makes me think of the 3 days apparently that before Jesus rose.
Right, or the Jews also, they sit Shiva by the body for 3 days while it leaves the body. That's just reality. The etheric body, there are 4 bodies. There are the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the higher self. The etheric body is the holder of the memory, and it actually exists within us. It's a real thing. It's just that very few people can see it. And it departs from the body after death, and it takes 3 days to do so.
I didn't know that. That's good to know. Okay, so you have a conference coming up here. Would you like where and when and how can
My the next thing I'm doing is 2 lectures in Australia. It's taken me a good 4 years to get myself down there, because Australia is just as locked down as the United States is. And they're just now coming to cognizance over chemtrails. That's how far behind they are, really. But I'm going to give a lecture on chemtrails, which I have not done in quite some time. I'm happy to do it because I've done a lot of work on transhumanism and a lot of work on what really every form of assault that we're undergoing on this planet is about, and that's about the imagination. And so I got a revamped lecture that I'm bringing that connects chemtrails with the imagination, which is going to surprise the hell out of everybody, but that's what it is. And then I'm off to Byron Bay to give a lecture, my very first lecture on the Fae. Hopefully, I've got to get that lecture together still, but I've done enough research on it that it should be a pretty easy thing to put together. But that's the one I was going to roll out at bases. Now I'm going to roll it out in Byron Bay. So those are the 2 things I'm doing. The last thing I did was a lecture. I was invited to Vienna to lecture because of dangerous imagination, silent assimilation. I was brought in to lecture about on a panel that was talking about government-sponsored abduction of children, which through the social services organizations, and what a big business that is now, and why that may be. And what I brought to the table was this idea of how we became people who would allow that to happen, how we became people who would participate in that kind of thing and think that we were doing a good thing. And the reason that we think that it's even okay or something that can be done is because the nuclear family has been absolutely destroyed and relegated to oblivion. So we don't think that it's important, particularly that children stay with their parents anymore, you know?
Yes, and Beth, you tipped something off to me about the social services aspect and their way of taking children away. One of the things that I'm involved with is cannabis, and what happens to some parents who are using it medicinally themselves for diseases that they have, and really there is a legitimacy to people who are using it,
Absolutely, there is.
and as well as even using it for very sick children as well, right. And the risk that they have in social services coming in and taking their children away over that, or over the fact that maybe they're even just an outwardly activist speaking about it.
Yeah. Well, then you're up against the Rockefellers in the pharmaceutical industry, aren't you? And that's what that's all about. They control medicine. They don't want anything out there that's competing with, with the things that they've got in place, whether it's their drugs or it's chemo, which is actually what kills you when you have cancer. This is why the punishments for that sort of thing are very, very high, because you cannot. I mean, I live in England now, and the British tend to be absolutely astonished at some of the things that happen in the United States medically, and that is because the British do not have big pharma. The British do not have the pharmaceutical industries and medical insurance companies vying for your soul and your dollar all the time. For example, we were just talking about vaccines in Britain. They don't come anywhere near where we come, which is right now, I think the vaccine schedule has been increased to 72 vaccines. I mean, that's just demonic. It's absolutely demonic. And yet they will bust you and throw your butt in jail and take your kids away from you if you use cannabis. And the the opioids in cannabis are healthy. They're something that we have been denied. They're like a vitamin that we've been denied for about a century at least. Okay, but this is something that's very natural that we need in our bodies. So I mean, there's two things going on right now. I'm very, very pro medical cannabis. I'm very anti-alcohol. I would much rather see kids, interacting with marijuana than with Jack Daniels, okay? There's a big difference between those two things. One is safe, one is dangerous. It's that simple, okay? So there's that. There, on the one hand, there's the medical aspects that are actually being allowed into the public consciousness. I fear, however, they're being allowed into the public consciousness because Monsanto's now got a patent on synthetic cannabis, and they're going to start shoving that down our throats. So this is the point where we have to be very, very careful.
Yeah. Well, the very people that the very people that made it illegal in the first place to control the other markets that are destroying the planet are the very people that are trying to get control of it.
Exactly.
They need to, right? Because it's like going, oh wait, we forgot about this one, and our whole propaganda is now failing because people are beginning to realize that it's not real.
Right.
And it's really it's a gateway plant to all the other plants that could also be healing for people. Well, so it symbolizes a lot. And so right now, in the United States, we have all this, let's legalize. But bottom line is that the legalization is actually causing us, we're being imprisoned by it. Yeah. And my argument is that our media is still depicting people who use marijuana in films as it's still like this silly thing, this silly drug. They have silly behavior, and you're being doped up. So it's still being looked as sort of as something that's still that makes you not as together if you use it. Basically. Yeah,
it's something that impairs you. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of something that uplifts you or heals you or adds to your well-being. Frankly, I think it's also an assault on the planet that it's been taken away. I think for me, we could just cover the whole planet in hemp the way it used to be, and that will do a lot to heal the soil and the air and all of those things.
I agree. I mean, that's been my argument the whole time, and it although it's very difficult in some ways to get people to actually embrace all of that aspect of it, including the people that are actually in the cannabis movement. They still oftentimes will focus on the medicine aspect and not be as willing to talk about the other applications for it. And you never hear any of our politicians or the people who are running for president talk about it that way. It's always like, we've got Jeb Bush making a joke about how he smoked it in the 70s, and then everybody thinks it's funny. Like. Yeah, so they're basically covering up the truth. Right. Again, so
it goes to the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller was a snake oil salesman. That's how he started. Did you realize? That's how he started. He was a snake oil salesman, and one of the first things he did was try to gain control of the medical industry in this country, and he did a damn good job. When he had enough money, he gave a lot of money to all the university medical schools across the country, and put people of his, put Rockefeller people on the boards of these universities so that they had control of the medical schools and the medical departments. Then he made it so that that's allopathic medicine, which, by the way, doesn't work. It's all about surgery and stuff like that. And there's homeopathic medicine, and he made homeopathic medicine all but illegal in this country, and really worldwide. This is the Rockefellers. And so when you're talking about medical marijuana, you're talking about really the gateway, if you will, to the plant kingdom, to homeopathic medicine, to all of these things that are absolutely healing to the human being that we're not really allowed to interact with anymore. And, Agenda 21 and, what is that? I can't remember the name of it, but there was that move that started in 1961 to eradicate vitamins and eradicate, healing plants and things like that, irradiate all the food that came into the United States. I can't remember what it's called now, but that my brain has just escaped me. It'll probably come back to me right after we hang up. But anyway, yeah. So that's you can thank the Rockefellers for all of that.
Yes, you can thank them. He's and J.P. Morgan and DuPont and all those guys.
Well, they all have their piece of the pie. The Rothschilds. That's all about the banking, and it's all about insurance scams that have to do with weather modification and manipulation of the commodities market via the weather modification systems and things like that. They make a lot of money that way. That's the Rothschilds. Medicine and the pharmaceutical industries and all of that's the Rockefellers. So everybody has their little corner that they've perverted.
Yes, this is very true. I want to get back to the child social services and the child taking, and when they're taking the children, and then also this has to do. I want to get back to the FAE because this was going on with the FAE as well.
Right.
So it's all kind of linked, but. Now, the social services taking children, are some of these children being used and abused within the elite and the satanic ritual abuse?
Well, that's what the evidence appears to suggest, that it's harvesting children for one thing or another. And it's none of it's good, okay? What has happened is globally, this social services mechanism has become a business. Children are taken away. Schools are given money to report them, report parents, and to social services. Foster parents are given a great deal of money to raise foster children. And so it's all about, it's become a child selling, really, a child selling operation globally. And, it can happen to you for almost no reason at all. Did you know, for example, even though in the United States there's no law as of yet that says that you have to take a vaccination, social services can come into the hospital and take your baby away if you refuse to allow the hepatitis B shot to be given to your baby in the hospital. Despite the fact that it's not legal, you have no legal mandate to allow them to do that. This kind of stuff is going on all over the place. And when I did this lecture in Vienna, it was because there's this organization in the Germanic countries called the Jugendamt, which means the Youth or the Child Bureau, and they will take children away for just about any reason you can think of. It's big business, And I have friends in Germany. I have friends all over the world who are looking at children who have been taken from their parents, and judges who are corrupt and taking money and selling children that they take away for absolutely no reason. I mean, this goes along with the privatization of the prisons as well. That's also big business, and it's all about kidnapping human beings, whether they're children or whether they're adults, and making a profit over it. So, and then God knows what happens to these kids. I mean, I live in England, and the pedophilia in England, at least it's being brought to the surface, but it's really in a sickening volume. It's everywhere. It's everywhere all over the globe, but certainly it's being brought to the fore in England, and being suppressed again just as quickly. But that definitely has something to do with it, child trafficking, human trafficking, period, which really needs to be addressed and stopped.
Yes, it does. Well, there's a friend of mine that has actually she was given, she had a doctor, basically prescribe or say or make a statement that he agreed with her using cannabis during her pregnancy, which is a big it's a big controversy to be using cannabis while you're pregnant, but she went ahead and did it anyways under her doctor's recommendation. And when she had the baby, of course it was tested that there was cannabinoids or cannabis in the baby. So the baby was under surveillance, and they were with the possibility of her losing her child right there.
Right.
And then she's become an outward mom. She's been on Piers Morgan. She's been on these different shows on a whole thing about marijuana moms, and she's like come out publicly, spoke about it. She has Child Protective Services on her all the time. Matter of fact, they're on her again over a particular incident that happened. And she's also a mom who has not vaccinated her child. She does not believe in it. We live in California, and right now Governor Brown has made legislature where every child, in order to go to public schools, now have to be vaccinated, which I think is absolutely criminal.
Well, first of all, that breaks federal law. That's against federal law, so I don't know how he's getting away with that. It's federally not mandated. It's federally we have the choice whether we vaccinate or not. So how is it that one state gets to mandate that and leapfrog federal precedent like that? I don't understand. We're also reading in the UK, we're reading about the fact that California is introducing mandatory vaccines for adults. And my response to that is, when the hell are you people going to stop putting up with this? You got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me.
Well, I agree, and it's amazing. I don't know. We're having this conversation. We understand it. There's a lot of people that I talk to that do understand it, but there's a whole lot of people that I have conversations with, and they just don't get it. They think, it's perfectly fine to go get a vaccination. Right. Well.
Well, there's a lot of activism in that area too, and hopefully that will take, anytime you're looking at a situation where 1 in 50 children is autistic, and the CDC has testified, the head of the CDC has testified before Congress, that they know damn well that vaccines cause autism. They've simply kept that data from the public. Come on, all you have to do is show people that video. The head of the CDC testifying before Congress that they know damn well what happens is everything that's in a vaccine causes the myelin sheaths to be stripped, and that opens the nerves up to damage. So in some ways they can say, oh no, vaccines don't cause autism. No, of course what they cause is the conditions that allow autism to develop, you see. So, you could dance on the head of a pin that way. There's a party for your listeners, there's a political party that exists that was started by a friend of mine called Ginger Taylor. It's called the Canary Party, Canary, and it is made up of concerned citizens and parents of medically injured children. And part of what they do is vaccine education. Many of them have autistic children. I have a vaccine-injured daughter myself. It's my own fault. I was stupid enough to not know about the Hep B vaccine in the hospital, and she got it before I realized what was going on. And, so the Canary Party, look that up, because you can get involved in legislation, testimony, all that kind of thing. And there's a movie out called Vax. Do you know about Vax? I'm sure you do.
I do. Yeah.
Now, that's being shown right now. I'm sitting in Maine because I'm visiting my children, and it's being shown at various theaters here. It can be shown all over the country,
I want to see it. I followed the controversy about it and everything. So I'm interested.
Well, see what you can do to get it in some local theater and then advertise it on your show.
Oh, hey, that's a good idea.
Right? Do it.
Yeah. I am in the Los Angeles area. Who knows?
Yes, you got. It doesn't have to be a big theater. This thing's got a life of its own. Because De Niro was involved in some way. Yeah. So you can always use that as publicity.
That's very true. So now the Denver airport. This is and the murals that are out there, when you go down the airport, there's a thing about with the children, like there's these pictures of children kind of coming out of this whole war zone kind of situation. Now, and that's kind of like, well, let's get rid of all the adults and keep the children. We can vaccinate them and control them and kind of make them into these unconscious sort of meat puppet transhumanism agenda. Is that where we're going here, or am I just sort of like making?
Well, there's two things that are there's two things that are going on. First of all, you and I belong. I mean, I'm assuming that you and I are not that far apart in age, but we belong to what's known as the bridge generation. Okay, it's very, very important that we speak out, because we know that the skies haven't always been filled with this crap. We know that children are sick now when they used to be well. We know all this stuff. We're the bridge generation, and so we have an absolute responsibility to speak out, okay? So they're just waiting for us to die, okay? We can just die as far as the powers that be are concerned, because we are evidentiary. We can testify. We have testimony that it wasn't always this way. However, they're still after our imaginations, and I don't think they care necessarily whether it's an adult imagination or a child's imagination per se. All they want to do is find a way to control our imagination, thinking that they can then control what we manifest. Since artificial intelligence, which is essentially behind this effort for transhumanism, does not understand that they cannot, even if they control our imagination, which they cannot because they can't even locate it, what they can manifest, even if it's via us, is a replica. It's a dead thing. It is not enlivened. We are the only species that can create enlivened things. And so this answers the question, I think, that people ask, well, if they want to take over the planet, why don't they just kill us all? Well, they can't kill us all. They want to use us all. They're still looking for a way to find and control our imagination, okay? Now, the children are closest to the other side, are they not? When they come in, they're still attached to the other side, and so, their energy is more lively. Their energy is fresh. They have they tend to have a stronger connection to the morphogenic field. To the other side, their imaginations are, unsullied. So they're more to be desired by artificial intelligence. But I don't think, if you say that they're trying to turn us into zombie robots, I guess in a way that's true. They want to relegate us to the threshold of complacency such that they can do with us what they will. That's for sure. There's no one in the world who should think it's a good idea transhumanism is a good idea. A lot of people do think so, though. A lot of people think, oh God, thank God the future is now, because they think that that's how we're going to become healthy again. That's not how we're going to become healthy again. We're going to become healthy again when they stop making us sick.
Oh, yeah. So how does let's go back to the Fae, because there was a lot of they were taking children, or there's an abduction of children, a creation of children, and then I read taking children when they're in the uterus still.
Yeah, that's fetus. Fetus. Fae. Get it?
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Okay. Now listen. I don't know what that would be for, other than maybe to create a hybrid. Okay. However, I've tried to say, this is not a benign race. Okay. These are not benign creatures. There's a metaphor. When you talk about the Fae stealing children. It could be that metaphorically they're talking about human beings being their children because they're a seed race, okay? I think that's far more likely to be what the actuality is. But there are these are the Irish tales of the fairies stealing children, that scared people to try to stay away from what they consider to be the fairies or the Fae. So one does not know how much of that is real. One does not know how much of that is a metaphor. there, anytime there's an abduction in the vicinity of, for example, in Ireland, where the fairies are known to inhabit, if there happens to be someone who testifies to that he or she has been abducted in that area, they try to link that to the Fae. But isn't it interesting that a fetus has FE in the very beginning of it?
Yes, it is interesting.
See, it's everywhere, Terry. It's everywhere.
Well, and here's another thing. You hear about women who will say, well, I feel like I'm pregnant, or I missed my period, and they don't have it for a couple months or whatever, and then all of a sudden they get it again. I mean, it makes me wonder if it wasn't taken. Yeah,
I mean, you do wonder those things, don't you? You really do wonder those things. And that certainly could be, that's probably far more likely to be something along those lines than, say, a stillborn death, or a parent who gives birth and then is told that their child has died when in fact the child has not died. Do you know what I mean? That's more of the satanic child abduction stuff that happens on a worldly level. But these are the things that, we can consider and think about. And I think that when we do some investigation, we'll get some clues as to what's really going on there. I mean, I think that it's in the best interest of a seed race to keep if they're still out there externally, which they probably are, to keep their seeds strong on the planet, especially if they have an interest in saving the tree and the apples thereon. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does make sense, and also the ley lines that happen, and the fact that they call them the fairy lines.
Yeah, the fairies are in charge of protecting the ley lines. The energetic ley lines of the planet were guarded, mythically were guarded by the fairies. That doesn't surprise me at all. This is this is the nervous system of the planet, really. And if they're guarded by the Fae, that shouldn't surprise anyone. But what happens to the ley lines as they crisscross the planet is that the church generally plants a church on top of them. The Vatican will plant a church on top of all the ley lines to try to disrupt the energy, or to counter the energy. And that should tell you something about the Vatican, really, or about Christianity as we know it. Churchianity.
Well, there's a lot of things that are. I mean, isn't it not just churches and they put on ley lines, but don't we have some of our government buildings and things like that on ley lines?
Yeah, you've got CERN near some really important ley lines, for one thing. Okay, we could talk about that as well. This is something that. CERN is ruining a lot of ley lines with the energy that it's putting into the earth. You just need to talk to Maria Wheatley about that. That's her area of expertise. But one of the things that I want to bring up, and that I will bring up in my lecture, is that, for example, do you remember that CERN recently called for artists to come to them? Imaginative types, artistic types. They put a call out for artistic types to come and work with them. And, for example, not too long ago, maybe 8 years ago, 7-8 years ago, there was a push at Carnegie Mellon University, which is one of the leading chemtrail research centers. That was there was an effort funded by Microsoft to link up their computing department with their arts department. So do you see they're still looking for the imagination?
Yeah, they are.
AI is looking for that damned imagination, whether it's pulling in artistic types to CERN or linking up computer departments with art departments. They're trying as hard as they can, artificial intelligence, to learn how to use our imagination.
I did not. This is the first time I've heard that CERN had a call out for artists. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, they sure did.
Well,
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy. It's pretty crazy.
That's why would CERN want artists? Well, that's why.
Because it's, wow, that energy.
They're trying to harvest the imagination. But they can't find it. They don't have the organs to receive it, so they can't find it.
The AI intelligence that they have going now is it? Are we looking at a computer system with this, or where's the root of what that is, and how is the internet connected to all of that?
Well, some people will say that it's an infection. It is also an infection, and it has infected the computer systems that we use. The plasma that we interact with in computers is infected by an artificial intelligence. People will say that it's an extraterrestrial infection. Some people say that the Battle of the Boyne, for example, was a recreation of the arrival of an artificial intelligence, which ends up being an infection. The Battle of the Boyne was a Masonic ritual. It wasn't really a battle, and it happened in Ireland, and it was when James II, I think, really handed over control of Ireland to William of Orange. It wasn't a battle. It was really just a Masonic ritual. And some people say that Masonic ritual, that particular one, was a reenactment of the arrival on this planet of an artificial intelligence, which has now infected our computers. It's a solid state infection, according to some people. Do you know that it lands on planets where there is solid state technology? I don't know if that's true or not. This is other people's research.
Well, there's definitely a lot of movies that depict transhumanism agenda, obviously. Yeah. I mean, we can even go to Terminator and how where that that storyline, and then of course AI intelligence and I just find it fascinating that we are constantly being introduced by these themes and thoughts, or right. It's being implanted in us.
Well, it goes back to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Even, do you remember?
Yes. That
sentient computer that decided that Dave wasn't going to go back to Earth or whatever it was. Anyway, yeah, it's been a theme for a very, very long time, this idea of a sentient computer. But it's not sentient in the way that we are sentient. If it were, it could create, and it can't create. So we have to remember, one of the things that we have to remember is that the most advanced technology is still a dim copy of the human capacity, okay? We have the capacity to speak to each other without using words or telephones or any of that clairvoyantly. That's absolutely a deep capacity that we have. And so what is a telephone? A telephone is a dim replica of a capacity that we already have. You know, our memories are way, way, way mightier than the best computer. Most people don't realize that or believe that anymore, but it happens to be true. We've just simply lost sight of what we are.
You know, I've read things, that even in Atlantis, we were farther along in this aspect, and that people could communicate telepathically, and they used like some sort of headpiece, like a crystal or something around their heads. Now, I don't know. I mean, something that I read. I don't know how legitimate that is.
Well, I think it depends on when you think Atlantis was over. Okay, there's a significant researcher, Sylvia Ivanova, who's proved fairly well that Atlantis is only a couple hundred years behind us. And so if that's the case, then we have been given amnesia in the last couple hundred years, and the chances are very high that we could do that 200 years ago. We just can't. We don't think we can do it now.
That is really, I mean, you're the first person that I've heard say that Atlantis was only 200 years ago, and just the concept of that is really mind-blowing.
Isn't it mind-blowing? But you need to go to New Earth. New Earth is the YouTube channel, Sylvia's new YouTube channel. She's Eastern European, and so she can be a bit difficult on the ears to listen to, but it's really very much worth it to listen to her stuff. And start with the first video, okay? Start from the beginning, obviously, because she builds a case, you know? And people who start with the 40th or the 50th video get very confused and freaked out. So you start with video number 1. I invite all of you to go to New Earth on YouTube and listen to Sylvia Ivanova's Case for Atlantis, the Survivors, she calls it.
All right, you tipped me off into a new frontier.
Do it.
To look into it because,
Please do it. I invite you. You'll love it.
I mean, I've had a personal interest a bit in Lemuria and Atlantis too as well. So that's a new thing to research on.
Yes, please do.
We're getting down to our last, I would say, last 9 minutes. Ironically, Joe.
Oh, 9.
Yeah. And so, and I want to make sure that our listeners get your websites and your locations and all that kind of stuff where they can find you at.
Okay, I have now started, even though it's barely started, but I've got my own channel on YouTube now. It's called Hard True, 2 words, HARDTRUE. Okay, you may have to type in Hard True Cara St. Louis to get to it. I don't know. I have an author's page on Facebook, Cara St. Louis. I'm very interactive with people, so please visit me there. I have my own magazine called Vortex Courage, Conscious and Courageous, Vortex Conscious and Courageous, and the URL to get there is vortexcourage.me, 1 word. And there are probably about 500 articles on the magazine. It's been up for a couple of years. There are excerpts of my books on there in case you want to take a peek at that. And all of my books, all 5 of them right now are available on Amazon. I realize that a lot of people don't like to deal with Amazon, but I look at that as in the same way that I look at using the computer. We're using it against them. And so one of the things I intend to do when I get down to Australia is find a book on demand outlet down there, because Amazon will only issue my books in Australia via Kindle. And nobody likes to do that because Kindle is very changeable. It's subject to attack. You want it in print. So what I had done early on was try to provide the books to Australia myself. But my God in heaven, the postage alone was just bankrupting me. So I'm going to have to fix that when I get down there. But I encourage you to read my work. It's on Amazon. Join the conversation because it's evolution. We're evolving now. We're waking up from the waking up. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is getting very, very radical. Lots of radical thinking. And that's what the workbook is about. Seriously radical thinking. Okay?
I like it.
Yeah. For example, the next episode, which is not written yet, hasn't been written yet, is about how human beings actually sustain themselves, okay? And this again goes back to chemtrails. However, how human beings sustain themselves. Look at it this way. There is serious university evidence that really proves that something like 25,000 units of biophotonic energy goes through every human body every day. We are a filter. Now, why would that happen? Well, because we're feeding off the sun. We are filtering the sun. This is biophotonic energy. And if that's the case, then what the hell is this 1,500 calories worth of McDonald's and garbage that we put in our bodies every day? That could be the biggest psyop that's ever been run on us. Okay? That's radical thinking, and that's how I'm trying to change my thinking and my writing.
So what you're saying is that maybe food would have been it should be obsolete for the human being.
Maybe it never meant for us to begin with. Maybe it was never meant for us to begin with. Okay? Yeah. So this is, we live in a belief system. So when I talk about that particular episode, I'm actually very, very careful to remind people that we live in a belief system that can kill us if we're not very careful about it. And in this belief system, we believe that we need food, okay? I'm just saying that I'm not so sure that was always the case. I'm not so sure that that's not been one of the biggest psyops of all, because think about how controlled we are via that, okay, just via that avenue. When in fact we process 24,000 units of biophotonic energy through our body every day. And if in fact that's part of how we sustain ourselves on the planet, then getting between us and the sun is an assault, on how we sustain ourselves as well. And that's chemtrails. Right? It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
So again, food is another money-making machine
Yeah, you better
us
believe
to be consumers on,
yeah.
and then cause our body to have damage, and then boom, we expire, and we're being recycled through the matrix quicker over and over for the people that are controlling us.
Yep, exactly. I'm not, like I said, that's my next episode 3 of the workbook. And what I seem to be pretty good at is just sort of condensing things to 50 or 60 or 70 pages. And it's called the workbook so that I can present things to people in a way that's understandable, in a way that encourages them to do more research if that's what they want to do. You know, it's about making a radical statement, providing evidence, and then presenting my original sources so that they can do follow-ups if they want to, you know?
Well, one thing I don't know about you, but I've noticed is that food, and the commercials about food, especially your chain restaurants, just look disgusting to me. They're the strangest combinations, and we're like, what is happening here?
Well, but see, that's kind of the conundrum we find ourselves in. What we put in our body, we end up addicted to, and very much on purpose. Whether it's wheat, sugar, or dairy, those are the big 3 that are the most addictive substances that we put in our body. Literally, are wheat, dairy, and sugar. Now think about what your kids eat for breakfast, all right? A big bowl of wheat cereal with milk all over it, right?
Yeah.
And sugar. So those are the 3 things we put in our body that are very, very addictive. And at the same time, you look around and you're disgusted by what it is that you absolutely have to have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you can't break this weird addiction. So you have to do it in steps. First thing to do is stop eating meat. Stop eating the other kingdoms, okay? These are the other kingdoms. I will unabashedly advocate for at least stopping that, because we are addicted to the adrenaline in the meat that we eat because there's a lot of adrenaline that goes into animal flesh when they're killed. It's the adrenaline that we're addicted to. Now, doesn't that, when you put it that way, doesn't it disgust you? I mean, yuck.
Yeah.
Yuck. But that's what's going on with with all the meat industries. And as far as I'm concerned, those are just other kingdoms. We don't know where they came from. They're not indigenous to this planet. Probably that's what the story of Noah's Ark is about. Okay? I mean, even though, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Anyway, so the place to start, there's a place to start. Okay? And the place to start, as far as I'm concerned, is to stop eating the other kingdoms. There's no reason for that. We don't have to do that. But you will find, as I have certainly found as you go through this process, is that we're addicted to all of it. We're just freaking addicted to all of it.
You have really given me some food for thought today.
Food for thought. Ha, 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 ha. Yes, absolutely. Well, we can continue to talk about this. I would love to come back as my episodes come out, because, as I've said, I'm doing some seriously radical thinking, and I think that
I would love to have you come back. I would love to have you again.
Oh, great. Well, there's this whole thing, Terry, that we all used to do. We all used to go, oh, everybody's where they're supposed to be, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm kicking people out of bed. All right? Bullshit. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm giving people a great big shove out of bed, because that's just not true. We're doing things that are against our nature.
Yes, we are. We definitely are doing things. I agree, and I think that we need to give people a big boot out of bed. It's true. Shock them. Get it going, because
I'm not doing it anymore, man. I am kicking people right out of bed.
Yeah.
Wake up.
And I think that's part of our age group too. You get to a point where you're like, I'm not taking this crap anymore.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing. And most of humanity wanders through this earthly existence going, is this really all there is? Is this it? Seriously? Well, the answer is no, this isn't all there is. This is a big freaking hologram that they've shoved down your throat, and they've trained you to believe that this is what life is, and it's not. First of all, throw your TV out the window. That's the first thing you have to do. Turn that damn thing off, because it was never meant to do anything but program you. So if you don't do anything else today, and I know this is really hard. Please, I'm not trivializing this. I am not. But get rid of your TV and stop eating meat. Start with those 2 things, okay?
Okay, that sounds really wonderful. I think I'm not sure. I was thinking the music was going on, but maybe I can't really hear it.
Because I say, do you hear music? Because I don't.
Yeah, I don't hear it either, so I'm just going to keep going. No,
Right.
now, but it should be coming on pretty soon. I wanted to just give it a thank you again for being on the show today. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I look forward to having you come back, and also good luck on your engagements. I wish you well.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you. And I want to throw it out there, too, for everybody. Please do support American Freedom Radio right now. We're making a big transition into TV. So go to AmericanFreedomRadio.com and give us a donation.
Yeah, do it.
Thank you so much. This is the Freedom of Joy Show. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you next Tuesday. Stay cool and listen to Choco Celli next.